This wasn't the work of a tool. It was the work of a weapon. A blade, a long one, sharp enough to dismember, silent enough to plan, cold enough to kill without panic. The new theory hit hard. Michael Gaine was not butchered in a frenzy. He was executed with purpose, and the weapon that did it wasn't lying around. It was chosen, brought in, used. The chainsaw story? A smokescreen. The real killer came armed, and they knew exactly what they were doing. Cut clean, too clean. Those words echoed through the Garda technical team like a warning shot. When Michael Gaine's remains were uncovered, investigators expected chaos, torn flesh, broken bone, the brutality of a farmyard tool gone mad. But what they saw was different. The cuts were precise, surgical, intentional. Not a single jagged edge. No splintered trauma. Just straight, deliberate slices. 3 chainsaws were taken from the property. All tested. All ruled out. They didn't match the wounds. Not even close. That's when the case turned. Forensic teams ran every chainsaw through detailed analysis, 3 in total, all recovered from the property. Each one failed the match. Inside the lab, silence gave way to certainty. The experts didn't speculate. They measured. They compared. And what they found buried in the cuts told a story sharper than any blade. These weren't the messy slashes of a chainsaw. There was no ripping, no splatter pattern, no oil trace. The wounds were smooth, methodical, bones severed in a single motion. Every crevice became a suspect. They weren't just looking for clues, they were looking for a sword. A blade that had done something so precise, so controlled, it changed how the entire case was seen. This wasn't an improvised act. It was surgical, intentional. Gardaí now believed the killer came armed and may have walked away with the weapon still in hand. Nobody keeps a sword in rural County Kerry. It's not a farming tool. It's not a hunting implement. So when Gardaí committed to that blade theory, everything lit up. This wasn't an impulsive act. It was premeditated. Someone drove to that farm knowing exactly what weapon they'd use. Whether it was a collector's piece, a martial arts training sword, or a replica, it didn't belong in that barn. And that tells investigators 2 undeniable facts. The killer planned this. You don't just grab a sword while things go sideways, especially not if you're in a panic. They were confident enough to bring a weapon that stood out, something traceable in towns, online forums, martial arts clubs. This sword is the killer's signature. It's the clue that characterizes not just how the murder happened, but who could have done it. Someone with access, someone with intent, and someone who knew how to disappear afterward. The weapon doesn't just reveal how Michael Gaine died, it paints a picture of the person who killed him. None of them could have made those cuts. That wasn't opinion. That was science. Which meant one thing. Whoever did this didn't grab the nearest tool. They came with something sharper, longer, deadlier, a sword, or something terrifyingly close to it. Once the clean cuts ruled out the chainsaws, the investigation didn't just pivot, it transformed. Gardaí weren't looking for a missing man anymore. They were chasing a killer with a purpose. The focus moved to the weapon. Not just any weapon, a long, sharp blade. Something capable of slicing through bone with terrifying ease. Something hidden or taken. Search teams began scouring every inch of the property. Slurry tanks were drained. Outbuildings were stripped. Manure pits were dug through by hand. This wasn't a crime of convenience. It wasn't committed with a rock, a wrench, or a nearby shovel. It was carried out with a long blade, likely a sword. That choice changes everything. Who brings a sword to a farm? Someone deliberate. Someone with an unusual mindset. Gardaí now believe the killer fits a very narrow profile. Possibly a martial artist. A collector of weapons. Someone who thinks ahead and thrives on control. This kind of murder, clean, calculated, and committed with an out-of-place weapon, suggests more than rage. It suggests ritual, a psychological distance, a need to dominate every detail. And that helps Gardaí shrink the suspect pool. Because not everyone can do what was done to Michael Gaine. Not physically, not mentally, not without leaving a trace of who they are in the way they kill. It's possible the chainsaws were a deliberate mislead, either planted or simply overwhelmed the early stages of the investigation. When Gardaí first arrived, the presence of 3 chainsaws from Gaine's property made sense. They were loud, brutal, and fit the scene. But the clean wounds wouldn't lie. As each chainsaw was meticulously tested, none matched the precise cuts found on the remains. What initially appeared to be the murder weapon turned out to be nothing more than a smokescreen. Whether it was intentional or coincidental, the result was the same. Investigators, and perhaps even the killer, were diverted from the real weapon, the sword. This revelation forced Gardaí to reassess the entire crime scene. Nothing could be taken at face value. Every shred of evidence had to be reevaluated. The blades in the barn weren't the killers, they were just red herrings. And unraveling that misdirection became just as critical as finding the actual weapon. In the beginning, the chainsaws made sense. They were on the farm, they were functional, and they were brutal enough to fit the horror of what had happened. So Gardaí seized them, 3 in total. For a moment, the case seemed to make itself. But then came the autopsy. The wounds didn't match. No shredded tissue, no oil marks, no jagged edges, just clean, deliberate cuts. The chainsaws were tested, one by one. All 3 eliminated. That's when the theory emerged. The chainsaws weren't the murder weapon, they were the distraction. Whether planted or simply convenient background noise, they kept eyes off the real clue. A sword doesn't belong on a farm. A chainsaw does. That contrast helped the killer buy time. It gave the illusion of chaos, while the truth was far more calculated. No blade has turned up, and that silence speaks volumes. Gardaí haven't found any sword on the farm. Nothing buried, nothing hidden in the barns, nothing tossed in the slurry. The blade has vanished. That leaves 2 chilling possibilities. The killer destroyed it, perhaps melted it, hid fragments, or disassembled it. Or they walked off the property with it. Left the farm undetected, carrying the murder weapon with them. Both scenarios mean the killer acted with calm precision. No panic, no dropped evidence. They knew the risk, the guilt, and still chose to remove the blade or erase all trace of it. That suggests someone who planned every step from murder to departure. A killer with foresight, not fury. There's a reason the wounds were clean. A reason the chainsaws didn't fit. A reason the killer brought a blade instead of using anything already there. Because this wasn't just a killing. It was a statement. A sword doesn't just end a life, it sends a message. It speaks to control, dominance, power. It tells investigators this wasn't about rage boiling over. It was about execution, not emotion. Every cut was deliberate. Every step after was calculated. From dismembering the body, to hiding the remains, to possibly walking away with the weapon. It all points to one thing. The killer wasn't trying to get away with murder. They were trying to do it on their terms, clean, complete, and unforgettable. With a sword as the weapon of choice, Gardaí have a sharper profile of their suspect and a much narrower scope for investigation. Here's the plan unfolding in real time. Cross-referencing weapon ownership, they're scanning retail records, second-hand purchases, local martial arts clubs, and collector forums anywhere a sword might have been bought or sold. Exploring local networks, investigators are interviewing anyone with a connection to weapons historical reenactment groups, fencing enthusiasts, even off-the-grid collectors in Kerry. Digging into digital footprints, Phone records, online searches, and chat logs are being scrutinized for any interest in swords, blade handling, or clean kill techniques. Re-examining past crimes. Cold case databases are being checked for similar dismemberment patterns involving blades, looking for potential links. This isn't amateur hour. This is forensic detective work driven by one fact: the killer planned ahead. And Gardaí are digging into every part of their life, financial, social, digital, to find the gap where that plan slipped. But make no mistake, the killer thought through every step. Bringing a sword, executing with surgical precision, dismembering, hiding, and potentially removing or destroying the weapon they left little to chance. That kind of calm execution shows discipline, patience, confidence, not rage, not impulsive violence, not a random act. The blade was both their tool and their signature, a weapon chosen not just to kill, but to conceal the path to escape. And until that sword is found, the investigation is hunting the ghost who disappeared with it.
I hate you. You're gonna die. I don't want to do this.